Hello there. Austria is on the verge of rejecting immigrants and even deporting them as the country lurches to the far right in upcoming elections. Whilst here in the UK, the EU establishment will be getting panicky right now. Austrian elections are looming, and the anti-migration and repatriation far right is on the rise there. But there's more, so much more. The Austrians go to the ballot boxes on Sunday, September the 29th to elect a new lower house, the National Council. And the indications are that a right-wing populist party, the Freedom Party of Austria, the FPO, led by Herbert Kickl, will win the day, or at least the most seats. That would leapfrog them from their current third place with 16.2% of the vote and 31 seats into first place. And with the FPO at 30% in the current polls, it could get 55 to 60 seats. And if the FPO continues its fast rise in these polls, then who knows? We could be witnessing a rise in power that would send more shockwaves through the European political establishment, following directly on the heels of the shockwaves caused by the AfD's very recent surge in the German state elections in Thuringia and Saxony. Soon, maybe, to be followed in the German state of Brandenburg, when their elections are held on the 22nd of September in just 10 days' time. But the real story is that a new right-wing alliance of EU political parties is gaining traction. The alliance, called Patriots for Europe, now has some 15 member parties from 12 member states, overseen by Jordan Bardella, the president of Marine Le Pen's National Rally. And these include Herbert Kickl's FPO. And more parties from more member states are expected to join. And that is not the only right-wing grouping. There is also the Europe of Sovereign Nations, which has 9 member state parties in it, including the German AfD. But as ever, the establishment system is doing its level best to at least sideline, if not destroy, groupings like this. And their main weapon is that even when these parties and groupings win a lot of seats, none of the other parties will work with them, let alone join in any coalition with them. Something that, although within the rules, completely dismantles the whole structure of proportional representation. For example, say the Austrian FPO did win 30% of the vote, but was kept completely isolated by the other 70%. Then how is that 30% FPO vote being represented? That 30% will effectively equal zero representation, won't it? Without proper engagement, it isn't proportional representation, is it? It's just a complicated form of ignore the right, the first woke lefty past the post wins. You're handing the gold medal to those that came second and third. Only the woke lefties would tolerate such a thing, as long as they benefit. And that lack of engagement will only fuel more resentment and allow those right-wing parties and alliances to gather more support. The whole point of PR is that everyone is properly represented according to the votes cast. And when that does not happen as promised, then that's when the real problems start. And what happens when those right-wing parties start winning total majorities as more and more voters are ignored by the system? Will the hard left abolish elections, as too divisive maybe? They also, where possible, use lawfare against opponents of the woke agenda. An investigation was started into Herbert Kickl, for example, for alleged breach of trust. But the huge investigation into EU Parliament corruption, Qatargate, do you remember that? has been completely memory-holed and just about airbrushed out of existence, despite Politico reporting in December last year that evidence from the European Parliament's graft investigation provides a record of more than 300 alleged attempts to manipulate EU democracy. Seems there's a two-tier corruption system in the European Union. So what is the Austrian FPO offering their voters? Well, here are the eye-catching ones. The promotion of remigration, the returning of people to where their families came from, especially for lawbreakers, as well as a reduction in accepting asylum seekers and limiting the time they can stay in the country. A citizens-only benefit system. An amendment to their constitution that, shock horror, states there are only 2 genders. And also banning what they term as political Islam. They would also provide for a referendum route to sacking ministers and even the government. Now, what the FPO can do if it does win the most seats then comes down to whether they have an outright majority of 92 seats or more, which is extremely unlikely, or who they could form a ruling coalition with. And judging by recent elections within the EU, where right-wing parties win through, such as in France with Marine Le Pen's National Rally, and in the German state of Thuringia with the AfD, the left, which nowadays also includes those who like to call themselves centrists, always, as I've already said, reject doing any deals with them. And for some weird reason they think that by blanking right-wing parties they can neuter them forever, while they pursue their own lefty agendas to the full. Don't they realise that all that does is builds up frustration and resentment? And we in the UK do it too. It's now coming out that Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson could well be banned from presenting on GB News, because Keir, the Neela Starmer's Labour Party government, is looking to clamp down further on broadcasting rules. The new Parliamentary Modernisation Committee, chaired by Labour's Lucy Powell, will decide whether paid outside engagements, such as MP media appearances, journalism and speeches, provide a benefit to the public or present a conflict of interest. Now, Powell is the leader of the House and is therefore a front bench minister, and committee chairs are normally held by backbenchers. So it looks to me like Labour is centralising all the power it can. Now, the more exposure a politician has, the more clout they can wield. But that also comes with the ever-present danger of fouling it all up with just one single slip. The media sword is, after all, double-edged. Or maybe Labour is worried that they might have to step up their media game and expose themselves to the potential pitfalls. I mean, let's look at what they're going to be considering again. Whether paid outside engagements, such as MP media appearances, journalism and speeches, provide a benefit to the public or present a conflict of interest. MPs talking to and with the public is a benefit or a conflict of interest. Sounds like they quite like their old-fashioned Westminster bubble and want to keep it that way, where the government puts out its press releases and spin-doctored statements and avoids scrutiny at every opportunity, while the media falls into line to ensure it keeps getting the morsels from the table to sell its product. And anything that upsets that apple cart must be stopped, and preferably imprisoned. It's basically yet another attack on free speech.